Before we get started, The Wind is an independent podcast made possible by listener support. To set up a monthly donation, head to patreon.com/thewind. For $5 a month, you get access to an extra feed called Guests, which will include full interviews from this episode and other audio pieces during the off-season. As listeners know, The Wind is made at a small desk in the woods. It is on the edge of a meadow at the base of Slide Mountain, which is the peak where most of the radio towers are for my part of the world. In the first episode of Year 6, I walked a big circle around it, and for the Year 6 finale, we head to the top.
So this was the thing. So I didn't get an email from Spotify. I got an email from a listener.
This is my friend Amber Devereaux.
I'm a writer, musician, and sound designer based in Glasgow, Scotland.
We had the pleasure of performing together at an audio showcase in Glasgow in 2023, where they did a live mix on their incredible hit audio drama, The Tower.
And it's this exploration of where music and sort of audio storytelling kind of, at what point does one become the other, and sort of seeing where that limit is.
The Tower is the story of a woman who decides to climb an impossibly tall tower, and it unfolds in these short, beautiful, dreamy episodes over the course of 4 seasons. Each episode features actors, sound effects, and a very present soundtrack. Amber scored the entire thing, and it sounds kind of like an ambient concept album playing under the story. Amber opened that listener email, which said this.
Hi, I've been listening to part 3 of The Tower, and I noticed that there's an episode missing. It just goes from episode 4 to episode 6. I just wanted to let you know in case something's wrong. And, you know, The Tower's been out for a while, so it's not a feed I actively check up on every day, you know? So I kind of went, I should probably check that out. And I checked, and yeah, that episode was missing, but also all of the first season and half of the second season were gone. Weren't there.
Unlike a news show or a chat show, which could be missing some episodes from the feed and still be listenable, The Tower is one single story that happens in order. So, of course, missing the first season means that the show doesn't make sense.
But only on Spotify, because that was my big panic, was, oh my god, something bad has happened to the feed. So I contacted our hosting platform, Libsyn, who were very helpful. They kind of said, look, you're not the only person that this is happening to, which I appreciated. And they kind of said, yep, this is a Spotify problem.
If you're unfamiliar with the back end of podcast distribution, a quick trip into the weeds. In short, the maker of a show uses a podcast host, like Libsyn, Simplecast, or a similar company, that usually charges a fee to maintain a working RSS feed with your audio in it. That is the host. And then on the other side, listeners use their podcast app or RSS reader to access that feed. The popular ones are Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, etc. It's kind of like in radio, there's a transmitter and a receiver. The Tower was definitely out on Spotify, but when Amber checked the other podcast apps and the RSS host, everything there was fine, meaning that the feed was okay.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely anywhere else. It is literally just Spotify that has this problem. Went to, opened up the chat function on Spotify's Spotify for Creators website, had a chat with potentially a person, unclear. And then that's when the emails started. They removed the episodes because they thought they contained infringing material. They thought I was doing copyright infringement, basically, which was not true.
Did it say from the music, or did it say...
No, it didn't. It just said infringing content. It didn't say what. It didn't say give me a time code. It didn't say what I'd infringed on. It literally just said copyright infringing content.
From here, it gets maddening in the way that AI-run customer service web chats uniquely can.
I got another set through.
Dead links, regurgitating help articles that have already been sent, circular recommendations that lead nowhere.
And like just every email, like I just trying to put a lid on this bubbling pot of rage that is building every time I have to answer these emails that are saying the same thing and suggesting the same workarounds for like 3 months and nothing changing. And also the more these emails are coming through, the more I'm like, I'm not talking to a human being. Like either they don't care or it's an AI, and I don't know which is worse. And like, I just got to the stage being like, please, can I talk to someone else? Like, I just got to the stage where I just had like a thing I would just say at the end of every email being like, this is wrong. This is a mistake. Please fix it. We've been doing this for 3 months now and nothing has changed.
At this point, Amber had a pretty good guess at what was going on. There is no copyright infringing material in the tower. And they know this because they created all of it, including the music. But they released the soundtrack as a standalone album. And they were pretty sure that some automated system was quote-unquote hearing Amber's music in the episodes, comparing it to Amber's music from some database somewhere, and then without any human involvement, removing the episodes for infringing on Amber's own copyright. They were allegedly infringing themselves.
And that is still unresolved. That is where we're at. Like, the episodes are still not there. I got an email from the escalations team. No idea what that means. And they just said, we'll get back to you. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't help me. You've just, like, it's just like the FBI came into the room and said, we're here. And then they left again. I'm like, that's not help.
They just printed out the email and got on an escalator and escalated their way out.
Yeah.
Like,
they just said, all right, we've gone to a different office somewhere, but it's still, and then that was maybe 2 weeks ago. Not heard anything since. So I need to send another email at the end of the week. So yeah.
When I saw Amber post about this on social media, it resonated in the little cavern in my mind that is attuned to the ways our current technology is hostile to life. And specifically, the ways that the current gatekeepers of our attention and conversation and artistic output and thought paths have become inhuman, fueled by greed. The algorithms are just the newest iteration in a long line of mechanisms and companies that shape the way we hear, shape what gets amplified, and win. The arbitrary ability for a computer program to mistakenly remove entire seasons of something creative and beautiful from a platform that promises all the audio you could ever want, and to do so for liability reasons with no reasonable recourse. That automatic binary action resonated in a way that turns my body to the south. That vibrating tone instructs my neck to point up, my head like a flower, my eyes fix at the top of Slag Mountain. There, I can see the radio towers. I'm Fil Corbitt. This is The Wind, a radio show and podcast from a desk in the mountains. This episode is called The Format.
The Wind. With Fil Corbitt.
The problem is I have a question I don't have words for. When I try to put language to it, nothing sticks, or it seems to be a string of words standing upright wearing the mask of the thing that I'm feeling. Though it gets louder as I approach, it also gets more like static. Tape hiss. The sound of a very loud air conditioner. Then, nothing. Like seeing a star that disappears when you point your eye at it. When plagued with the problem of imperceptibility, the hazy cloud of questions and feelings, two methods have proved themselves useful. First, ask around. My friend says via email that the answer might be radio. It seems silly or disappointing because it's obvious. I'm on the radio right now, I start to type in response, but I don't send it because I think they might be right. The second method, a trip up the mountain. The algorithms have devoured a lot, and right now they're mid-swallow of what's left of the so-called podcast industry. So I start up the mountain to try and orient this moment as someone who makes audio. And I figure that my friend might be on the right track. I'm gonna look for answers at the base of the radio towers. I start at 4,500 feet elevation with an AM/FM radio receiver traveling by automobile. Signal, noise, tone. The musician and writer Damon Krukowski has written books, podcast series, and email newsletters about how noise is as important to a sound as the signal it accompanies. In any medium, both are present. The sound of the guitar, the noise of the magnetic tape it was recorded on. The sound of a frustrated, longing sigh, the noise its folded form, a thin but perceptible electronic pulse bounced off a telecommunications satellite. The voice is the signal, the rest is the noise. Though unintentional, inside that noise is a universe of sonic information. Distance, temporality, economics, culture, technology, digital media, Krukowski writes, is the logical and economic conclusion of a war to vanquish noise and leave only signal. But what is signal without noise? The voice of a minister without the arched ceiling to shape it is just the words of an unsure man. The voice of a broadcaster without the electromagnetic hum and crackle that frays at its farthest edges is just, well, the podcast. That is the moment where things split off, when all of this audio is freed from the invisible noisy waves and enveloped by the noiseless and digital. So maybe this way. Ascending questions. 1. If our modern world has eradicated noise, then what is that silence hiding? And why are things so loud? 2. How did we get here, and is the problem structural or cultural? 3. What is your name and where are you right now?
My name's Dennis Funk. I'm in my basement in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, United States of America.
How would you describe your relationship to podcasts lately, both as a listener and as a maker of them?
Podcasts. Podcasts. I hate podcasts. I hate the word. I like this. I don't know. I've in the last 2 years, I've grown to despise the idea of what a podcast has become, because it almost feels like a word with no meaning.
The first podcast was published in July 2003 by enclosing an MP3 file into an RSS feed, which was previously used for text-based blogs and news sites. It was an optimistic moment when the great decentralization of information was about to crest. We will get back to this. I'm often finding myself instead of abandoning the word podcast, like kind of trying to push back against the things that I see as not that kind of cool, unstructured kind of experimental thing, and being like, you know, these TV shows that are on YouTube aren't podcasts. But it's interesting that you kind of were just like, you know what, take it, like take the term.
Yeah, they can have it. Like, I think, because I just think in, like, I don't know, my worlds are like broad, where I'm a weirdo, but I'm around a lot of normies, right? And so, like, I think normal people think a podcast is what they find on YouTube. And so, like the battle for that word is over, because the general consensus is like a podcast is what is on YouTube. So, like, why bother? Like, it has evolved to that point, and that's totally fine. That happens.
2 decades after the first MP3 was distributed through a feed, the open and free exchange of audio has been funneled into a series of turbines that power the industrial money printers of people far from the microphone. In response, many of us are attempting to pull some part of ourselves away. I called up Dennis Funk because last year he created an audio magazine under the name Written in Air. It's a collection of audio stories on different topics in different styles by different producers. He released a physical magazine on paper to accompany it, and also on cassette.
The stories that are in audio are also on tapes and exist kind of as like an album.
The tape sold out, but the digital version is still available.
Even like doing the tapes, like I like physical stuff. I think it's nice. Like, people keep books, people collect books, like, and it's not even because, like, you're going to read them again. And I think with the tapes, I've said this a lot of times, like, I don't even expect people to listen to the cassettes. It's like the potential of the thing being there. Like, the idea that story or information or knowledge, like, lives in a book or lives on a cassette is almost as interesting as the stories themselves, right? And that you can look at that and feel the way that you felt when you listened to it, I think is incredible.
I, too, have been putting episodes on cassette tape. I sell them at the merch table when I perform, sell them on the website, and give them away anytime I can. A few years ago, I went to an audio festival in New York City. And though it cost a couple dollars per tape for materials and a bunch of time dubbing each, it was very much worth it to hand the things out to fellow audio makers and experience the sharing of a physical object. I have done it every year since. In my journey up Slide Mountain, I think this experience is a clue.
It's not the problem. It's not a problem at all with the medium. It's the trick of the medium in that it's invisible. Like, it's hard to put a name to things that you cannot see, right? Like TV is TV because, you know, there's an object that you see and hold. Radio is radio because there's a physical radio. These like, you're not going to call podcasts like your phone or something like that. Like, that's another problem where everything is mushed into this same device now. It's hard to call them things. Like, you know, people who make YouTube videos are called YouTubers. Like, they're named after the app. They're named after the container that exists for it. But podcasting is so fragmented, and it's even the audio itself is in so many different places. It's like, you can't just call it one thing.
Continue, now at 7,500 feet elevation, with an AM/FM radio receiver traveling by automobile. Ascending questions. 1. Can audio be held inside a container? 2. How did this medium become more hostile to experimentation than the risk-averse public radio system that drove its rise? 3. Is it more hostile to experimentation? 4. Is money the root of all evil?
Okay. Well, before we had weblogs, before we had the web, information, entertainment, everything really, all that we did was very centrally distributed. So, if you wanted to have other people hear you, you had to impress a talent scout and an executive at a movie studio, and you had to rise through the ranks and become a star. And by the time you did that, there really wasn't very much of you left. What the web does is, and this has been a sort of a steady process that's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years, is the steady decreasing cost of distribution for thinking, for creative works, for ideas, for all kinds of art, for all kinds of writing.
This is the voice of Dave Weiner. And what you just heard is an historic piece of audio. And
that process has been inexorable since then. And the web drove the cost down even more, to the point where publishing is virtually a free thing at this point. I mean,
this is what I call undoing A.J. Liebling, the idea that freedom of the press belongs to every man who owns one. Now, you can buy it for $500. But is it working that way?
You can buy it for even less.
This is the very first podcast episode. It's a show called Open Source, hosted by Chris Lydon. He's interviewing Dave Weiner, a pioneering computer programmer and advocate for blogging. Weiner figured out a way to embed an MP3 file into an RSS feed and encouraged Lydon to distribute his radio show over the internet. Unlike internet radio, which simply streams a radio station online in real time, this new tech allowed Lydon to post a finished MP3 file to the internet, which would then be automatically distributed to anyone who is subscribed to his RSS feed. Those subscribers could shunt the century-old experience of hearing the spoken word in real time with everybody else, and instead play it on demand.
Okay, I want to ask you the rude political question, which has to do with the Bush administration and the war in Iraq. It seems to me we've never had less debate, less dissent, more confusion, more general mass deception about what we were getting into than we've had in the last 6 months or a year since 9/11. It has not been an explosive period of expression, comment, criticism, investigation, democracy, in short. What's missing?
Good question. I don't really know. I mean, one would think that all we needed was the mechanism to enable that, but it sure didn't seem to happen. The hope is that at some point, not only will the technology be there, but the human spirit will be there as well to get that information into our hands. There are some areas where having the publishing technology in the hands of the people has made a difference, but for the large part, on things like that, people still, where clock is turning backwards in that area at this point.
I think this is another clue. If the means of distribution were so promising, what happened? Maybe I should try to describe what happened, because it's possible that if you're not a person who makes audio stories on the internet, that this has been gibberish. 1. What am I talking about? Podcasts, to this day, are distributed via RSS feed. It's an archaic and extremely functional holdover from Web 1.0, and I believe it's insulated this medium from enshittification. But it has embedded within it two problems, or gifts, depending on who's asking. First, it's open, cheap to distribute, free to listen to, and therefore hard to monetize. Second, it is hard to share, and therefore doesn't work well in the viral attention-based economy. The way you hear this show today is the same way that people heard Chris Lydon asking Dave Weiner about Bush invading Iraq. Since then, there have been many attempts to torpedo the RSS feed, most notably from Spotify, then YouTube, and lately Netflix has entered the fray. Now that many people think of podcasts not as an audio documentary or even audio chat shows, and since the industry has succeeded in calling video talk shows podcasts, it seems that they're closer than ever to killing it. And what shapes the medium right now is a pivot to video. Pivot to video. The phrase pivot to video was common just after the Great Recession and the collapse of newsrooms around the world. The social media platforms made information sharing easier and then more addictive with algorithmic feeds. Newsrooms struggled to keep up as Facebook wanted snappy, fun videos and hot takes, not long, well-researched investigative articles. So many newsrooms started creating videos that the platforms would like, chasing views, assuming that they'd translate to viewers, subscribers, then money, the way it used to. But Facebook views don't pay the way a newspaper subscription or public radio donation does. They allow the platform to hold more eyes, then sell more ads, and pay themselves. Today, the phrase pivot to video in the news business is sort of a meme phrase. It's a cautionary tale of allocating resources to chase a fleeting trend set up by the fickle and temporary demands of a tech company, and bankrupting yourself in the process. Right now, many audio makers know that people are seeing clips of podcasts on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, or that people think podcast is another word for YouTube chat show. And so many of us are bending to the will of the platforms in order to find or maintain an audience. Which brings us back to RSS. Like, how do you explain what the RSS is, and are you worried about it, being eaten up?
Oh, I'm extremely worried.
This is Alex Sujong Laughlin, co-owner of Defector Media, former host of the hit show Normal Gossip, current host of Try Hard, and lover of the RSS feed.
Netflix's podcasts, quote unquote podcasts, are not even on RSS. Like, they're just on Netflix. They're not on any podcast platforms. They're nowhere, just on Netflix. They're TV shows.
It's a TV show. Yeah, that's not a podcast.
Yeah. I'm just such a simp for like Web 1.0 rhetoric, like open web stuff. I really, really believe in RSS as a technology, and I think we lost something huge when our like internet discovery mechanisms moved toward algorithm rather than RSS. Yeah, I don't know. I feel annoying being like, you should care about RSS. I'm like, I feel like a person I don't like, But
RSS, which by the way stands for Really Simple Syndication, delivers content only from people you've subscribed to, and typically in reverse chronological order. It gives the listener a lot of power over what ends up in their feed and what ends up in their ears.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing technology. This is kind of related, but the other day I was sending a letter. I needed to send a letter, and we recently moved to this house in Pennsylvania, and it has a mailbox, and this is the first time I've like lived in a normal ass house where I'm not like, it's not subdivided with a bunch of people. Like, we live in this house. This is our house. The mailbox is our mailbox. And I was like, oh my God, should I try clipping this letter to the mailbox to see if the postal worker takes it? And he did. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that like society still works the way that we were like promised it would work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every time something comes through an RSS feed, it's sort like that's the way the internet was promised to work, right?
Yeah.
I've heard people say that the original sin of radio was repeated by podcasting, as if it were a parable. The original sin of radio, they say, was making it free. People paid for recorded and live music. Why not ask them to pay for good radio stories?
when radio started, nobody knew how to pay for it.
Here is audio maker and writer Julia Barton on a show called Phonograph, talking about an early magazine contest to figure out how to creatively monetize radio.
And so they got all these letters and all these proposals.
Do we scramble the radio signal and charge people to unscramble it? This is basically how Sirius FM works. Do we deliver radio through a wire and charge people a subscription? This became cable TV. Or do we charge a tax on vacuum tubes? In today's world, that would be like a tax on smartphones or tech company profits, which goes to the creators of the audio that feed them. That final answer won the contest, and the solution was never implemented.
They attempted to come up with an idea. They actually picked a pretty good one that was like reasonable. And then they just blew it off. And then they were like, oh, let's just see what happens.
But I'm not here to litigate. I'm here to climb the mountain where the radio comes from. I parked the car now at 8,900 feet elevation. With an FM portable radio receiver in my bag, I travel on foot toward the top of Slide Mountain. Ascending questions. 1. If the medium shapes the format and the industry is increasingly ugly, increasingly lining the pockets of people who hate free and open communication, who hate expensive and impractical art, is it possible to create something beautiful in its shadow? 2. Who pays for beauty, and should they? 3. Is this cassette tape still a clue? To answer that last question, I called Janice Rose.
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Janice wrote an article in 404 Media called Why I Quit Streaming and Got Back into Cassettes.
I'm of a certain age, I guess, where I actually remember very distinctly having cassette tapes as like my main listening source. Like some of the first music that I quote unquote owned was actually on cassette tapes that I recorded off of the TV. Like while watching MTV, I would just I had this Fisher-Price tape recorder and I would just aim it at the TV and record. And that was the only way that I could record these songs and have them so that I could listen to them again. I still have this very distinct memory of tapes being part of a very intimate listening experience.
Janice Rose is a DJ, writer, and musician. And part of why I reached out is because she approaches this from outside the podcasting and radio world. When I get caught in this thought spiral, it can feel so specific to my artistic output and my medium. And so it can sound like navel-gazing about the podcast industry. And who cares about that? But I think what powers this whole thing is that it is not just applicable to a little corner of audio world. This is about how all of us are going through a massive shift in the way we create and engage with art of any kind. Radio, music, visual arts, craft, it's a shift that masquerades as a decentralization while offering hope to the obscure artist on the fringe. But in reality, it's a centralizing force, hoovering all of the economic benefit of all this creativity into the bottomless pockets of a very few. The algorithms claim that they just show people what they really want, but what they actually do is incentivize art and viewership that captures the makers and their audience in that algorithm's orbit. This is the format.
The way I came to this conclusion was, just being completely sick of streaming and how it just created this sense of drive-by listening, I guess was the way that I described it, where you're not really effectively connecting with the artist or with the art. When you have that kind of dynamic, it creates this tendency to, when something is not the thing that you're trying to hear in this exact moment, you just hit skip and go to the next one, and then to the next one, and the next one. And then suddenly the practice of listening to music becomes less about connecting with art and with appreciating music, and more about, I want to listen to the thing that is going to optimize my brain chemicals at this particular moment. That has never been what art has been about. And I think that's like a fundamental shift in how people consume music.
1. Is the only way to disempower the men who own the algorithms to change the way we consume the output? You mentioned in the article the word friction, going out and searching for Bandcamp artists to download or for finding cassette tapes in a store. Like, it is work and it is friction, but if the opposite is like this frictionless listening experience where you're not choosing much at all, you just kind of choose, like a vibe or a feeling and then let it roll. And so I'm wondering, have you had any kind of difficulties with reintroducing friction, or has that been, kind of cathartic to have to do that again?
I mean, both, I think. The whole concept of friction was like pretty much invented by the sort of Silicon Valley engineer mindset people. Like we didn't really think about music listening in this way prior to having all of this digital technology, where the sort of, and this doesn't come from nowhere. Like this is coming from the sort of mindset and the perspective of people who are engineering software systems. And when you're engineering software, the tendency is to try to make things as efficient and seamless as possible. And I think obviously there are a lot of use cases where that is the desirable outcome. But when it comes to media and specifically when it comes to art and music, applying that mindset really changes fundamentally the way that people engage with art and media into a thing where it just becomes this kind of thing that's moving through a pipe. And that is not at all how art, I think, should be consumed. It's not content. Like the word content and friction, I think, go hand in hand in explaining the mindset of this sort of Silicon Valley engineer mentality that has created so much of the sort of infrastructure in which we sort of engage with art and music, unfortunately. And it goes a long way to explain why things are set up the way that they are, because from their perspective, music and art are all just content.
What's strange to me is it's sort of like when you would hear the sort of like tech bro mentality of like, we need to eat, powders and like goos.
Yes.
And
no, it's exactly that.
Yeah. And it's like this thing that, when you tell somebody like, oh, I've quit eating and cooking food, instead I just eat goo, they think you're crazy for the most part. But that's that's really what Spotify feels like to me, is like, I don't know, I like cooking. Like, I really like cutting up the potatoes, even if it takes a while. Like, I really like making the tape and putting it in and and sometimes like messing up as well, because I think the other thing is risk.
Yeah, no, I mean, risk is a huge part of it. And I'm actually really glad that you brought up that example of the nutrient intake, because I remember it was specifically the creator of Soylent, I remember, gave this interview, and this must have been like 10 years ago at this point, so it was kind of prescient in a way, where he said, I think that kitchens are a place of violence. I never want to make food in a kitchen, and no one should want that. I want to efficiently absorb nutrients. The mindset that's being professed here is like, I need to like consume my nutritionally optimized, food slurry so that I can more efficiently output JavaScript.
My instinct is to go, I guess, backwards into like the existing analog media that I know. What I'm trying to figure out is there some sort of, instead of a retreat backwards towards older technology, like, do you see any way to push forward through this moment to like a new technology or new way of, listening and sharing music that isn't as rooted in that sort of mindset? Are you seeing anything or sensing anything that could be next?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think it's really a particular technology that I'm looking for, that I'm seeing occur in response to this, but I do notice that like one thing I was trying to emphasize with the piece that I wrote about, getting back into tapes is that like the point of that piece wasn't like, you should do this too. Like this is the best way and everyone should do this. It was more about, here is the thing that I thought to do that got me back in touch with my listening habits and made me reassess my media consumption in general. And there are many ways to do that. Yeah, I don't think there's any one particular like solution or thing that I see as being like the next thing that people are like gravitating towards. But I do think that it all revolves around a reassessment of your media consumption habits and a desire to sort of change your habits in some way or another to make so that the way that you're interfacing with this art is a lot more intimate and more personal.
Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify and man who wears a shirt with a guitar on the front so you know he likes music, once said that Spotify's real competitor isn't other streaming services. Spotify's only competitor is silence. The noise pipe never runs dry. (9,500 feet elevation with a portable FM radio receiver traveling on foot up Slide Mountain. I can now see the radio towers. Ascending questions. 1. Is the medium the art form? 2. Can I learn from the radio, which flows one way and doesn't keep a play count? 3. What do we want from this art form? When I was 19, I dropped out of college and hitchhiked across America. I was majoring in business, pause for laughter, and I had been booking punk and psychobilly shows, so I thought maybe I would open a music venue. I hated business school, and I stood on the side of Interstate 70 on Colorado's western slope, where I was picked up by two sisters around my age. They played an episode of This American Life from their phone, and I remember being entranced. Though not a direct path, it led me through the woods by the side of the freeway and eventually into journalism school. I remember the first time I heard Joe Frank as I printed t-shirts for rent money. I laughed like a maniac while I boxed them up. And I remember countless times listening to pieces, shows, series on walks, flights, while laying on the floor, transported for a moment to somewhere else. Into another person's thoughts, or home, or into an idea that transcends all of it. Now, when I listen on a long drive to Erica Heilman, Scott Carrier, Larry Massett, the Kitchen Sisters, crafted podcasts from so many of my friends and colleagues, I sometimes finish an episode and just jettison across the desert in complete silence. I let the lingering sounds rendered as ideas bounce around in my head until they become nothing, which often takes a while. That is what I want from the format. 9,702 feet of elevation. With a portable FM radio receiver, I reached the top of Slide Mountain. On the top of Slide Mountain, I maintain a radio shrine. It's tucked into a jutting stack of granite slabs, and I climb the rough natural steps to the top. The shrine is a small portable FM radio with some ephemera, and surrounding it are 3 small rocks. One black, one red, and one blue. The latter is a shard of tile gifted to me from my friend Thomas Liu, who picked it up outside NPR headquarters and sent it through the U.S. Postal Service. The original shrine was destroyed by a marmot, but that's not the point. The point is that this evening, I've reached my radio shrine and I pour an offering onto the rocks and I wait for answers to emerge from the static. I turn the radio on, I plug my microphone into the tallest tower and transmit all the audio I have, mixing it with the audio from afar. This show is for a single receiver, my own. And so I listen and turn the knob.
There's another article that I think Defector put out. The title of the article, "The Future of Podcasting is Here and It Sucks."
Yeah, so I wrote that article after I went to Resonate in Richmond, Virginia, it's kind of an audio art festival. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. This has been a really difficult few years for the industry. And overall, like, personally, me as a person who makes podcasts, I feel incredibly lost and just not sure about where I want to stand in the landscape when everybody is making video podcasts, and it feels like the nature of what a podcast is changing. So I went to Resonate not sure what to expect. I was kind of expecting it to feel like a funeral. Just so many lost jobs, so many teams have been decimated. When I came into the industry, it was in a really fat time. Like there were a lot of jobs, there was a lot of money, and that is just all dried up, it feels like. But when I went, I was really surprised at the level of optimism that I saw. And I think that part of it is that, like, now that the prospect of getting rich is kind of off the table, the people who are, like, in it for the game, we are still here. And it's sort of this feeling of, like, it feels like everything has been burned to the ground, and so now we can start over.
No, I don't think it's too big of an idea, and I've thought about that so many times too. Is like, people often, when they see the tapes, they're like, "Oh, I remember that," like the nostalgia thing of that. And it's like, I have thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I get that, and like, I don't really want to be doing this. I'd rather be doing something else, but what is the other option? Like, the options that are in front of us don't feel all that great. And that's why I'm almost like, okay, is it another service? Maybe it can still rely on RSS. But is it more curated? What is that curatorial arm? Like, who says what goes in a place? Like, it's messy and weird, yeah.
What value should we be assigning to music and to, art in general? And how can we change our behaviors to make that reflect our values more accurately?
You have to do the thing that you want, right?
You're listening to radio.
You do your best work when you're being yourself, or you're making the thing, or doing the thing that you want to do.
The people who produce this culture and who enjoy this culture are ultimately the ones who have the power. It's not these giant corporations who have centered themselves and made themselves sort of the arbiters, or claim to be the arbiters of all of this stuff.
We don't really have the equivalent of like a This American Life or a Radio Lab or anything like that, where it's like it's getting big backing, and it's got a team big enough and well funded enough to put out interesting work. Because this is the other thing. There's now a podcasting model where you need to be able to put out a lot of content in a short space of time regularly, and that's what advertisers want.
I don't know. I think that, like, those days are largely behind us. And I'm really interested in, I guess more of like a one-to-one human connection with people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that sounds dumb.
I don't think so. I don't think that sounds dumb. I think, from a personal standpoint, I make this show, like, mostly out in the woods at this little desk. I've made this whole spiritual practice, outdoor practice, where I, like, walk out to this place. I make this thing. It's very, it's like, it's this thing that's my artistic output that I love doing. And, like, that in itself, it kind of sounds cheesy, but it's like the process is really, like, the reward for me. Like, that's what I enjoy doing, and, like, wherever it ends up, I've always had this idea, like, eventually, if I do well, then I'll make a paycheck, and I could, like, buy a house, or, like, pay a mortgage or whatever. And, like, that stuff is just so hilariously out of the realm of possibility now that it's like, well, I'm still doing it, and I think I'm just going to keep doing it, and maybe that really is the answer, is, like, making the art to make the art, and being okay with the fact that it might not be monetarily sustainable ever.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like where you're landing as well? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and also, like, should it even be sustainable? Like, should we want it to be? Like, obviously, I would love to live in a utopia where, you know, we don't have to worry about our living expenses and everybody can just spend our days making art. But that's not the world we live in. And very few mediums, if any, are monetizable to the point of being able to live off of it for large amounts of people, you know, and especially without making any sacrifices to your integrity in the form of video or other things. I think, like, it's kind of the bigger question is, like, how do you exist as a creative person within capitalism? And, like, it's kind of how everybody does it. It's like we are eking out, like, little ways to make our things. And I think that, like, the making the thing is so much more important than, you know, what you can get out of it. I am reminding myself that, like, the entirety of my artistic expression doesn't have to exist in what I do for a paycheck.
That's the best I can offer.
The internet is a fact of life, and there's absolutely nothing strange about it to them.
They call this the start of a continuing conversation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris.
The hazy little constellation of a question that I can only see in my periphery, here at the top of Slide Mountain, finds a staticky cloud of an answer. As much noise as it is signal. I assume there is more in the hum, but for now, the sun sets on the Sierra Nevada. It's just past summer solstice, and the last patches of snow catch the rays of a full July moon, as do the tips of the radio towers looking over the mountains and the city where I spend my time. And the static plays us out. The Wind is produced by me, Fil Corbitt. This is an independent podcast made possible by listener support. If you'd like to join the community, visit patreon.com/thewind. This episode included a bunch of interviews with people whose art I deeply admire. During the off-season, I will post some of those long-form interviews over on the Patreon, where for $5 a month, you can get access to the bonus Wind podcast feed. Thank you to Alex Sujong Laughlin, Amber Devereaux of Tin Can Audio, Dennis Funk of Written in Air, Janice Rose, and Seva from Intertapes. We had a great conversation that didn't make it into the final cut. I'll post links to everybody on the website. This episode featured audio from Open Source, Phonograph, and from the Real Life Radio Waves. Music came from Strike Effect's new EP, Diode. The song Like a River from Hana Lee, and finally, The Melody That Made You Mine, the voice in the Old Village Choir, both from the public domain. Finally, I did a lot of listening and reading for this episode. I've made a research list in the description and website, including that episode of Phonograph I sampled. This is TV Now from Good Tape Magazine, Alex's article for Defector, and a short list of books that helped shape this piece. This is the final episode of Year 6. I'll post the epilogue soon. For now, thank you for being here, and keep listening.
In the